Let's review what you learned in math class last week. Number 1, it is about 37 million miles from Saturn to the Sun. What is that in scientific notation? Well, if I want to change this number 37 million from standard form to scientific notation, I need to find the decimal on this number. I know the decimal on any whole number is always at the end, right? So 37 million is like 37 million.0. So what I want to do now is move this decimal until I make a number that's between 1 and 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I move the decimal 7 times, I make the number 3.7, and 3.7 is going to be my coefficient, or my number in front for scientific notation. Now I move the decimal 7 times, so let's go through our choices and eliminate those that don't have an exponent with 7 in them. So we're definitely not going to pick B or D. So now I need to decide, should my exponent be a positive 7, like in C, or a negative 7? Well, I know that I started with a whole number, 37 million, and I didn't start with a decimal number. So I know that my exponent should be positive. So I know that this is going to be 3.7 times 10 to the positive power of 7. Number 2, the distance from planet Saturn to the Sun is 1.56 times 10 to the 6th power. What is that in standard form? So now it wants me to take this number in scientific notation and convert it back into standard form. So I know I need to take the number 1.56, and I'm going to move the decimal as many times as the exponent tells me. Because the exponent is a 6, I'm going to move the decimal 6 times. Now, which way do I want to move the decimal? Well, a positive exponent tells me that this number in front is going to get bigger. So I want to move the decimal 6 times to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we want to fill in our empty place values with zeros. I should have 4 empty place values. And we want to get rid of our old decimal because we can only have 1. So our new answer is going to look like 156 with 4 zeros behind it. So that would be D, 1,560,000. Notice choice B is a decimal number. We could go ahead and eliminate that right away. Choice A has too many zeros behind the decimal. It has 6 zeros behind the decimal. We should only have 4 zeros behind the decimal because we moved the decimal 6 times. And C is definitely not it because look, that decimal point never moved. It's still between the 1 and the 5. Number 3, list the following in order from least to greatest. Well, when I want to take numbers written in scientific notation and put them in order, there's a trick that I can use. The exponent, or that small number over the 10, will actually help me order from least to greatest. So looking at my exponents given, which one is the least? -5, -8, or +2? Well, I know that -8 is the least because it is the furthest to the left on the number line. So that's going to be my first choice. My next choice is going to be that -5 exponent, but there's 2 numbers in scientific notation that have an exponent of -5. So when the exponent looks the same, you're going to go ahead and look at the number in front. That's called the coefficient, and that's going to help you decide. Since I want to go least to greatest, I want to pick the coefficient that is less than the other. Well, I know 2.56 is less than 4.76, so that should go next. And then the 4.76. And 1.8 times 10 to the 2nd power is going to be greatest because we know that +2 is greater than all of those negative numbers. Number 4, order the following from greatest to least. So we're taking these numbers written in scientific notation again, and we are going to put them in order, but this time we want the greatest number first. So let's look at our exponents. -7, -3, 4, and -3. Which one of those exponents is the greatest? +4, so that should go first. Now I'm left with an exponent of -7 and 2 exponents of -3. I know that -3 is greater than -7 because it's closer to 0 on the number line. So I know that one of these choices should be next, 7.9 times 10 to the -3rd or 7.15 times 10 to the -3rd. Again, when the exponent is the same, use the coefficient in front to be your tiebreaker. So since I want to go greatest to least, I want the coefficient in front that is greater this time. So 7.9 is greater than 7.15, so I'm going to put that one next. And then 7.15 times 10 to the -3rd. And last, that 3.6 times 10 to the -7th. I know that's the least because -7 is furthest to the left on the number line. That's the smallest exponent. Number 5, it says evaluate, -13 over 20. So it wants us to take this fraction and convert it into a decimal. We have 4 choices here, A, B, C, and D. Because it's a negative fraction, I know that my answer is also going to be a negative decimal. So I'm going to eliminate some choices that I know right away don't make any sense. Since my answer should be negative, I'm going to get rid of C and D because they are both positive. So now since I don't have -13/20ths memorized, since I don't know what that is as a decimal, I'm going to do some long division to figure out what the better choice is, A or B. So I'm going to set up top dog in the house. That number in the top always goes in the house. So I'm going to put 13 up top. And the number 20 is going to stay on the outside. And your decimal always goes straight up, keep it in the same spot as to where it is. And now let's go ahead and solve. So 13 divided by 20. I know 20 is bigger than 13, so it's going to go into 13 0 times. 20 times 0 is 0. And we'll have 13 left over. So now we're going to bring down this 0. And we need to ask ourselves, how many times will 20 go into 130? Well, I know that 20 times 5 is 100. So I know that one more 20 would be 20 times 6, and that would be 120. So I'm going to put a 6 here, and 20 times 6 was 120. And so now I'm going to subtract that from 130. 0 minus 0 is 0, 3 minus 2 is 1, and 1 minus 1 is 0. So we have 10 left over as our remainder. 20 will not go into 10, so we are going to bring down a 0 and ask ourselves, how many times does 20 fit into 100? Or 20 times what would equal 100? Well, I know that 20 times 5 is going to equal 100. So when I subtract, I'm going to have nothing left over. And of course, my decimal should be negative since I started with a negative fraction. So final answer here is A. Number 6, what percent is equivalent to 3/5? Well, if I want to figure out what 3/5 is as a percent, I'm going to take this fraction. And first thing I'm going to do is convert it to a decimal. And once I know what it is as a decimal, then I can go ahead and convert it to a percent. So I set up my long division, and I'm going to put that top number 3 in the house. Top dog always goes in the house. And we're going to put that number 5 on the outside. Decimal always goes straight up so that it stays in the same place. I know that 5 won't go into 3, so 5 times 0 would be 0. And then we'll have 3 left over. So now I can bring down a 0, and I need to ask myself, how many times does 5 go into 30? 5 times what would give me 30? Well, I know that 5 times 6 equals 30. So when I do 5 times 6 and I write my answer down below and subtract, I get a remainder of 0. So when I convert 3/5 to a decimal, my answer is 0.6. Now to change this decimal to a percent, I'm going to take the decimal point and I'm going to move this decimal point 2 places to the right. 1, 2. So this is where my new decimal would go. I'm going to go ahead and cross it off, and I need to fill in my empty place values with a 0 and then add my percent sign. So 0.6 is equal to 60%, which would be choice D. Number 7, which number is equivalent to 0.7%? Well, I want to take this percent, and my choices look like decimals, so I want to convert percent to decimal. To do this, I'm going to take my percent number, 0.7, and I want to move my decimal point 2 places to the left to create a decimal. And I need to fill in my empty place values with a 0 and cross off my original decimal. So when I converted 0.7% to a decimal, I got 0.007, and that would be A. Number 8. Which of the following numbers is equivalent to 40%? So what I want to do is take every number and convert it to a decimal, starting with 40%. So I know the decimal on 40% is at the end, like the number 40.0, and to convert a percent to a decimal, I'm going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So 40% is the same thing as 0.4 or 0.40. Now I want to know which of these choices, A, B, C, or D, is going to be equal to 0.4 or 0.40. Right away, I see some choices that would not make sense. C says 0.04, and that is not the same as 0.4. And D says the number 40, like 40.0, and that is definitely not the same thing as 0.4. That is much, much greater. So my 2 choices left are A and B. I need to figure out which one of those is going to equal 0.4. To convert a fraction to a decimal, we're going to have to use some long division. So I'm going to set up my long division and start with 4 over 100. I know that that top number needs to go in the house, so I'm going to write 4.00 under this sign. And the number in the denominator goes on the outside, so 100 would stay on the outside. Bring your decimal straight up so it stays in the same place. And I know that 100 goes into 4 no times. I also know 100 is too big to go into 40. But I know that 100 will fit into 400. Exactly how many times? Well, 100 times 4 would be 400. So 100 times 4 would give us 400. And 400 minus 400 leaves us with a remainder of 0, so that's how we know we are done. So 4 over 100 is equal to 0.04. And that is also not equivalent to 40%. So last, we'll go ahead and check 2/5. So again, I'm just going to set up my long division. That top number 2 needs to go in the house, 2.00. And the number 5 can go ahead and stay on the outside. Decimal goes straight up. I know that 5 goes into 2 0 times, so I'm just going to put 0 there as our placeholder. But 5 will go into 20 exactly 4 times, because 5 times 4 equals 20. So I write my answer down below, and then I subtract, and 20 minus 20 is 0. And so now I know that 2/5 equals 0.4. And so B, 2/5, is equivalent to 40% because they both equal 0.4. They both have the same decimal. Number 9, which of the following has a value greater than 3.3 times 10 to the negative first? So again, we want to change everything to decimals so that it'll help us compare. 3.3 times 10 to the negative first, that exponent -1 is telling me to move this decimal 1 time to the left. So this is equivalent to 0.33. So we're saying which of these choices, A, B, C, or D, is greater than 0.33. Well, right away, I recognize that D, 0.133, that's smaller than 0.33. And I also recognize that B, 0.33, can't be greater than this number because they are actually equal. So just looking at those two narrows it down to A or C. Let's look at C first. To change 30% to a decimal, I put that decimal point on the end and move it 2 places to the right. So 30% is really like 0.30.